So I've always been someone who's cared about the earth, other people. I always joke I was kind of born this way. And, I always expected to get into this line of work somehow. But my journey there was something I definitely didn't expect. So in my late 20s, I've had chronic illness my whole life. So I've always been used to being sick. But I was sicker than normal, and I knew there was something going on, and I was just going to doctor after doctor. And because I was so young, and had other health issues, they just kept saying, oh, that's your endometriosis, that's your rheumatoid arthritis. Oh, it looks like you're just really low on iron. And it wasn't until I ended up being sick for about a year and a half until one day I was working at Starbucks at a coffee shop. And I remember I was leaning over, I couldn't stand up straight, and I said, I am going to the hospital. So this was in the height of COVID. So everything was locked down, and I was able to make it into the hospital. They ran some tests, and so I was alone in a emergency room hospital bed when I found out I had stage 3 renal cell carcinoma, which is a type of kidney cancer. So as you could expect, that was pretty shocking. I wasn't really expecting that. And I had to fight cancer during COVID, which, was really challenging. You didn't have access to treatment in a timely manner. You didn't get the same type of access to support systems that maybe you would if this had happened at any other time. And I kind of became obsessed with this question of, why do I have kidney cancer? Because it was very shocking to all my doctors, to my rheumatologist, to my PCP, the oncologist treating me. Everyone was like, this particular type of cancer is something we typically see in men that are in their 60s, 70s, or older. So for me to have it as a young woman in my late 20s was very strange. So a part of my cancer journey was you go through and you get genetic testing done and you see a geneticist because it is such an unusual case. And we had found out I had something called a CHEK2 gene mutation. And there are so many different types of gene mutations we're just kind of figuring out in the world now and figuring out what it means. Most people are familiar with BRCA. CHEK2 is kind of like that, but even within every mutation, there are 1,000 variations. So my particular mutation, I get cancerous and non-cancerous tumors, but they have to be triggered by something. There has to be something that makes it come about. And so we knew that much, and a couple years go by. The East Palestine train derailment happened about just under 4 miles away from my home, and I became very sick after that, and was trying to get all different types of health testing or, air testing, soil testing. And actually, about 6 months after the train derailment, I got some soil testing done, and it came back that I had very, very high levels of PFAS and PFOAs, which are forever chemicals in our soil and near our well, in our well, so in our drinking water. And that was unrelated to the derailment, but it helped kind of solve that mystery of, what was my trigger for kidney cancer at that age? And so really, ever since the kidney cancer, which is now, 5 years ago, I'm cancer free, which is great. I'm not tumor free because this is a part of the course now. Every time I have a virus or any type of environmental exposure, my body just creates tumors, and it's kind of a question mark if they're going to be cancerous or not. So I have to undergo a lot of different types of medical tests, and I have to do a lot of monitoring, but it has really inspired me to do the work that I do now, which is be a public health advocate, but also an advocate for our environment and environmental exposures. I think after you go through any type of disaster or experience, you have a kind of a viewpoint that only people like you can have. And I really got to see all of the injustices and the gaps that are, not only in the US regulatory process, but also in nonprofits and any type of agency that would support communities after something like this. So I'm someone who I love action. I don't want to just talk about the problems. I really want to do something. So after the train derailment, there were a few different things that I was like, all right, we have to work on this problem. One of those things was there was like no mutual aid. And, it's very challenging when there's thousands of people and they're saying we need relocated, our clothes smell, our home smell, we need to start new, and FEMA isn't responding, and you are told, oh, the lawsuits are going to take years, and your insurance company says, oh, we have to wait until the lawsuits happen. So these people really become stuck. And so in the beginning, myself and a couple colleagues were just, trying to figure out how do we help solve, even if it's one family at a time. We can't come up with a process that's going to help thousands of people, but like, how do we take the people who are in this fight and make sure they're taken care of? And I do that through a disability lens because something I've learned is, you'll hear the Environmental Protection Agency or government officials say, oh, well, it's safe. But in my experience, they don't tell you who it's safe for because it's not safe for me, and it's not safe for young children, and it's not safe for senior citizens. We are what's called sensitive populations. So a lot of the work I do now is centered around, how do I make sure people that are elected, people that are overseeing billion-dollar corporations, how do I make them understand that just because something's safe for the general public doesn't mean that everyone's safe? And then how do they make changes to ensure that every type of person is safe?